Welcome, everyone, to FileMaker Friday. It's FileMaker Friday. So it is Friday. It is a FileMaker Friday. Welcome to another awesome day at fmtrain.tv, where I'm here with Jacob Taylor. If you go to the fmtraining.tv website, if you go to the top of the page, you can see some amazing stuff. This is fmtraining.tv. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the default tab is the live training tab, and this is where we have the content. Nick Hunter will be back Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. And Jesse Barnum will be here on Monday. Now, today we're going to be talking about 19.5.3. There was an update. There's some very relevant data in there, but I'm trying to lay the groundwork. So today's not about user interface design. Today is about 19.5.3, and then I'm addressing kind of the roadmap of shenanigans for the next 7 days or 10 days. Yep. So today is 19.5.3. At some point, 19.6 will come out. I don't think that. From what I can tell, I think that's October probably, if I had to guess, but I'm not sure.
It'll happen. There's a lot of churn in how the transactions work.
Has that been finalized? Because Claris released a document on how the transactions work. Did they finalize it?
I don't think so. So to be clear, I've not read that document yet. It's on my to-do list. Because I want to know. It's very literally from Rick Kalman. Here's what we're thinking, and here's what we were trying to come at with this feature. And I think that's probably very useful to understand where they're going to be. There is a lot of gnashing of teeth in the developer community about it to try and push them in just frankly a better direction. I don't know that their direction is bad per se, but right, if we can get a better V1 of that feature being officially supported,
that would be good.
Awesome.
Should be a feature that they release preview with the big caveat that we might change it, right? So people really get in front of it. But anyway, so today is not no UI. Today's 19.5.3. Oh, as a reminder for those of you who are not certified FileMaker experts, I know some of our competitors watch the live stream. Welcome as well. Maybe we can teach you something or not, or maybe you could teach us something. But if you're not like a super duper expert, support the channel. We greatly appreciate it. How do you support the channel? Buy some of our training. We recommend the complete bundle. There's also this video only bundle, and we're actually going to potentially come out with another bundle that's kind of in between these two. Buy some of our training that helps support the channel, even if you're just going to gift it to someone. Okay, that'd be great. All right, so I'm going to quit sharing, and then Christian Schmidt is there. So if we have any crazy questions about FileMaker, like can FileMaker interact with a slot machine to derive the correct winning values on a slot machine, that is a function in the Monkey Bread plugin. And so Christian Schmidt is here. He can talk about that if we get kind of a outside the normal kind of question pops up, because he's got 7,853 functions in his product, and one of those I'm pretty sure can hack a slot machine. So I'm going to quit sharing. Stop share. Jacob, you want to share your screen and start talking? Tell us about 19.5.3, because my copy of FileMaker now says, hey, 19.5.3, right? So
yep. I have to always tell you, best place to look for change logs from Claris. They post them in their support site. Sometimes they're easier or more difficult to find, to be perfectly honest. I will always hit the engineering blog as well.
Blog, is it there? That's one of my favorite ones.
They bumped it up. It's up at the top right now. Looks like they haven't posted something amazingly recently, but that's oh, actually, I didn't even catch that one. You can see it's not purple, so I didn't click on it. The running FileMaker Server in a Docker for the newer version of Ubuntu. The old one, I think, was for it was the 1804. I've done some, when was that? Only a few weeks ago. I helped somebody unmess that because they basically tried to do that, and it didn't go well. And there's a bunch of stuff that's not documented that you have to kind of know about FileMaker. And this was, as always, someone who had developed in FileMaker for 20 years, but they weren't a server person. And so they've not dealt too much with both the server product itself generally, and then also kind of the evolution of the Linux builds. There's some stuff that basically was omitted from the 1804 document, which is what I always have to tell people, be careful with Claris docs, because there's always something that they forgot to include. It's omitted steps, things that they think but they know, if you're super expert, if you're not, you miss it, or you didn't have it set up, or it's something you never knew. It isn't your fault or anything like that. It's just it's one of the issues with documentation from something like a vendor. Sometimes is they're inside the business, they write the software, that kind of belays a certain understanding of it that may not exist in the general public, and so you leave a step out or something like that.
So let me help everyone with this something real quick, and this is a generalization here. And once again, you don't have to deal with me too many times. I'm here a little bit, but when I go down to Claris and you talk to people at Claris, their view of the world is generally utterly and totally different than the rest of the FileMaker community. And I'm not saying one's bad or good, it's just really different, right? And I mean, not a little bit different, like 5 or 10 degrees different, but like, it's like us discussing, hey, let's talk about FileMaker and supporting customers, and someone walks in the room and says that the sky is blue and the grass is green, or if you don't have any grass, dirt is brown. And you're like, it's not bad or good, it's just like way different. And so that's one of the things I always notice when I go down there. What they're seeing and what they're looking at, what they're dealing with, totally different than what we do as a general rule. The best people in the world in the FileMaker community, whether they're inside of Claris or outside like what we do, is the best people are the ones who can kind of see both sides and try to it's like a hostage negotiator that sees both sides of it. The goal is for us to see that way when they say something that's like the sky is blue and like, why should I give a shit, right? You need to understand their perspective. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It just is how you it's how you understand people, right? Does that make sense? So anyway, all right, off we go. Keep going. So where's our 19.5.3 stuff?
So we have 19.5.3. I want to point out there are basically two things that are fixed in Pro. So this is primarily a server conversation. A tiny bit of backstory that's kind of helpful to understand here. So 19.5.1 came out. Whatever, generally speaking, we love it. It's great. Also, they changed the quote function in a way that is super incompatible with how everyone was using it. And so they had to somewhat quickly push out 19.5.2. And so that was okay. They kind of unrolled, backed out, depending on what the thing was. They undid some of their most horrifically breaking changes in 19.5. And so it generally works again. 19.5.3 is the revision to that. So it's got a couple fixes. They're on my screen for Pro. There's like 2 of them, at least that they told us about. There's about 2 of them. They got an OpenSSL update and a fix for messing with the file options dialog box, messing something up, which is actually, that's really kind of a funny.
Yeah, with some sort of, if you edit something and you're logged on with limited access, you can't log back in again or something. Yeah, so
you get
it's a real kind of weird outlier. It's one of those bugs that I don't know, you could reproduce it and you run into it and you're like, I swear I didn't screw this up, and you quit FileMaker and reopen it or restart your computer and magically it works again. Yeah. So I'm surprised they caught that bug. That's good. All right.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
So, all right, so that's the Pro stuff, right? So then what's
and server actually has a list. So So we have the same one, update to OpenSSL, bunch of addressed features. The Ubuntu one is awesome. Again, so for 19.5, they're trying to switch which SSL library they use under the hood on the server side, I think. We'll see how that goes, to be perfectly honest. There's not to talk too much technical detail because I think we're not supposed to, but in the testing stuff right now, they're messing with different SSL libraries is one of the things that they're doing, and they shipped a version that just half the encryption stuff doesn't work, and it's like in the list of things like we know basically. So whatever, but in this case they probably failed to mark the libcurl new TLS library as a dependency or something like that. I saw some posts from people who are having issues just installing the new version. That was all. They've fixed a couple issues around the OAuth integration, because there's a couple situations where like the there's like you, the server, and then the third party, right? Like Microsoft or Google or whoever you're using. And so there's like a circle that gets posted around. You reach out to Microsoft. Microsoft talks to FileMaker Server, and there's this big circle communication that goes on. Under certain circumstances, they wouldn't actually post details about your username back to the FileMaker server, and so it wouldn't have your account name available. That probably doesn't mean it's not available. It just wasn't in like the JSON blob or whatever that comes back. So they're backfilling that from somewhere else. There's actually like a little unaddressed issue at the bottom associated with this Apache change. One of the big changes in Ubuntu, in FileMaker Server 19.5 on, I think the new Ubuntu specifically, the 2004 build, it's not new anymore, 2204 is out, but whatever, is they switched to the Nginx web server, which frankly is awesome because it's the one I've used for like 15 years and I love it. It's I wouldn't call it way better than Apache. It's better for certain things and in certain ways. Apache is amazing because everything is a module, literally everything in the entire software. You can like have it manage memory differently. That's a module. Like it's amazing, but that comes at a cost, and that cost is understanding a really rather massive configuration system. It's powerful for the same reason that it's very complicated. So they've switched over to Nginx. That tends to be faster. It's a little easier to use. I'm told there was some performance that came out of that. In any case, they've had a little, I don't know, some challenges with because converting from Apache to Nginx like in stream is a little complicated. Even when you're the vendor and you're like, no, I need, Apache had these rules, Nginx needs these new rules, and you're like swapping between them, you can still end up in a situation where you don't quite get what you're looking for. So, and then this one actually is awesome. I'm just going to point this out because it's great. That's one of the reasons, Richard, you should read that. That's one of the reasons we were not quite going to 19.5 as aggressively as you might think, because it did that. You would run the upgrader and it would essentially appear to work. Server would start up, right? Files might open, etc. Admin console couldn't be logged into.
Ah, damn. All right. Well, that's like almost bricking your server, but not quite.
Yeah, it was not great. Not great.
Now, FileMaker Server what's the next one? Intermittently experienced the following issues. So I'm just going to read these. This is the first time I've seen these.
Great.
Right?
Yep.
Right. FileMaker Server stopped responding during scheduled backups and validations. That's just like stupid. Closing database, admin console took over 5 minutes when no clients were connected. Hey, we had this training about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. Never assume it's going to close when you tell it to close. And that's why we don't run Windows updates or any updates automatically, because the operating system doesn't, let me say this. If the operating system tells FileMaker to shut down, like shutdown, and even if everyone's logged out of it, FileMaker Server is like, my mom and my parents used to call it dilly-dallying. It's kind of this kind of wandering, kind of, Dora the Explorer walking through a park, no to give, and it'll get there when it gets there, right? Well, the problem is that the operating system goes, okay, FileMaker Server, you've shut down. You should have shut down. We probably specified some sort of Microsoft document that you're supposed to shut down at this sort of time, and you shut down. So now we're just going to quit your processes and terminate you. Right? Headshot, right? And so then meanwhile, you've got databases that are not closed properly and crashed. No bueno. And we run into this all the time with people who are, I'm an IT expert. I'm an IT expert, right, Jacob?
Yep.
Right? I'm an IT.
Literally recently, one of our longtime customers, they had a new IT company take over. It's a very standard, I'll give it as an example, not naming anybody, but it's a very standard example. They tried to do the good thing, right? They took over this company's IT stuff. They went in and they said, oh, they have these vendor servers. They don't have auto updates enabled. We're going to loop them into the patch management system, which, short version, automatically applies Windows updates on some schedule that they know what the schedule is, so they can keep an eye out, and then reboots the machine when it's done, right? Sounds great. On like bringing everything on to current updates and that. Love it. Absolutely love it. However, the first time this triggered, it crashed all of their databases. Because why? Because they have 20 some odd databases and the files couldn't close in time. Windows gave up waiting and just started shooting stuff. And that's crashed files, period. That's crashed files. If you cannot show me the log line that says that it closed correctly, file closing. If you look in the event log in FileMaker, you can look on the admin console, or if you look at the one on disk. I guess at this point I'm becoming old school because I just look at the one on the hard drive only. But there's a pair of log entries for every one of those operations, and it is like file name closing, file name closed, and you want both of those. If you do not see both of those for every file that is open on the server, one of them crashed or more of them, right? If one's missing from the pair or something like that, one of your files may be crashed. A bunch of theirs crashed because their data moves a lot is the short version, and so there was maintenance to do at file close time. That's a generally true statement for FileMaker, but in this specific scenario, that maintenance, whatever it's doing at file close, that delays the shutdown of the software, even if FileMaker Server tried to go quickly. And so, like, it doesn't work. And so this vendor took over, first month, basically crashed all the company's databases. My engineer got screaming calls because nothing was open in the morning correctly, because we turned off the auto open databases feature, so that in a case like this, it would come in, everyone would scream because why? FileMaker's down, right? Okay, perfect. The human goes in and looks at it, goes, oh, like updates applied. Files didn't open because it rebooted, et cetera, right? They do the little incident response there, figure out a kind of super basic timeline of what happened and what they need to do to fix it, which is restore from backups. And so that part's easy, right? That's why we do it. It's why you have hourly backups. It's why we set up all the servers that way. Especially case like this, right? They tried to run it at like 3 a.m. or something. Perfect. There's no data that's going to change. Like, flawless scenario to restore from backups. But you can't trust that Windows, for example, is going to safely, allow FileMaker the time that it needs to close everything out and shut everything down. This is to say nothing about even users logged in. This was at 3 a.m., so no one was in the file at all, any of the files. So
yeah, so we have this is our Windows server, and the Windows server is going to shoot your FileMaker server when it doesn't respond the way it wants to.
It literally like gets tired of waiting. I'm told there's a Windows setting you can like increase the number of seconds it will wait or something like that. But like, to be safe, we're talking about boosting that from like 30 seconds or maybe a minute, I think it is what the default is, up to at least 5.
I'd give it 30 minutes if it was me.
Yeah. So I think 10 minutes is about 10 minutes would cover all of the server, the wildly long server shutdowns I've dealt with. However, I'll tell you a specific scenario where that still won't save you. And actually, Richard's 30 minutes won't save you either. Customers with insufficient hard drive speed, basically, backups take a long time to run. We ran into a client where their backups were running, honestly, 45 minutes out of the hour. It bit us because we were trying to do work on the server, and as of I think 19.5, you can now cancel a backup. It takes a little doing, but you can do it. That's like a new feature. It wasn't possible previously. So so we ran into the situation where if a backup started, period, any schedule, and it wasn't instant, we'll say it takes an amount of time, and God help you if it takes 45 minutes or something like that, you're waiting. There is no, like, you can tell FileMaker to shut down, you can tell to close the databases, whatever you want, give it all the orders. It's not going to do them until it completes the backup. Strictly speaking, that's probably not a bad thing, but it causes a lot of confusion with users because they've asked the software to do something and it is not obeying them, not immediately anyway. And so there's a few things like that.
All right. What's the next one?
Yeah.
So we're closing that. Database files failed to open after backup verification during a schedule.
Oh, nice. We don't turn that on automatically on the servers, but we do set up a schedule for it.
FileMaker Server stopped responding during midnight automatic backups.
Oh, that's a bad one.
With the yeah, because
That's the default schedule. I know. That's a bad one.
Yeah. FM, OData, file stored, incorrect timestamp.
Yep.
That'd be bad. OData.
Oh yeah, that's another thing to talk about with 19.5. 19.5 ships OData on all platforms. We have OData on Windows and Mac, and it used to be only Linux. So
there's people here who don't know what OData is, so you need to spend a couple minutes and explain what it is.
It is a modern CRUD, if you are familiar with that acronym. Create, remove, update, delete, create something, read, create, read, update, and delete, which is it's just a standard type of interface where you don't, frankly, it's not that you don't know, it's that you don't need to know what the third-party data system is. Like there's libraries for this stuff, so I'm just hand waving, but there's a library, if you're a coder integrating with one of these systems, there are libraries that you can use that will automatically explore for you what the create command, the read command, et cetera, like what those are and how they work into your software. So you can just say, call into my CRUD library. Here's the server details over here. It'll talk to the server and get those details, and then it can do it. And you say, oh, I need to create a record on this table. That's it. You don't need to know anything more about the end data system, FileMaker in this case, right? So that the OData is a honestly, a lot of people are more familiar with it because it's used in FileMaker tends to be like small industry stuff. It's used in much larger industries to do data interchange between computers where the companies aren't, they don't trust each other. They're just trying to move data back and forth because they have customers that are requesting stuff.
Christian Schmidt just jumped in here. I'm going to interrupt with what he said.
Yeah, what did he say?
Data API is what Claris invented. OData is a standard created by Microsoft, so you'll find a ton of tools for that specifically, right?
Yep.
So,
yeah.
Although I don't know.
It's like a more standardized way to do it, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. And so this is more of a Christian Schmidt statement. So if I had to do a web enablement, right, with some sort of, I use the term, well, I'll say custom web publishing or something. I don't know if it's a custom web publishing thing. Would you prefer, is it better to use the data API or OData? Is one a complete replacement for the other? My guess is probably not, right? I mean, at what point do you use one over the other?
I don't know. I'd have to go look at the documentation for what their OData can do. My question, for is it one-to-one or functionality wise would be around things like firing scripts and stuff as part of update processes.
And
that's probably possible, but I don't know. Yeah.
Blobs or container data seems to be an outlier in triggering scripts. Christian Schmidt says OData can do more like change schema. Okay, wow. Okay, cool. Well, that'll be interesting to see what happens with that. All right. Cool. All right.
And there's also part of it that's like you're going to end up, if you're just doing data processing, it may not matter so much. The other end of it, though, is like if you want to talk to the admin API or something like that, that's data API based essentially. And so you're going to end up learning about the ergonomics of that in the first place.
Scott, Stu says, have we had a live stream on OData yet? We haven't had it yet because I don't have anyone at RCC who's using it.
I haven't built anything with it.
An expert with it, so we would have to get some other victim to come on our show. Yeah, maybe.
Yep.
We try to do all things FileMaker, but that's the rub with that stuff, right? So it's try to do all things FileMaker, but we can't be the experts at absolutely everything. So he's saying John Renfrew should be the guy that we call about that.
Okay.
Did Todd?
Who is he? Is he cool? Should we bring him on?
I don't know if he would even want to do that, but yeah, he was on Todd Geist's podcast last week. Okay, well, we can always throw that out if someone knows him or wants to throw that out, because we're looking for someone to do, I guess, kind of an OData dog and pony show. So that looks like most of the issues there. Upgrade installation FileMaker Server, blah, blah, blah. even previous installation.
Basic stuff, send email works again on WebDirect, etc. Yeah.
This is where you're running an update if you read this, right? This is I hate update.
And I really recommend you do. Seriously, if you're not like calling out to us to say, "Hey, come do this for us," great. Please, you need to, your due diligence is reading all of these changes to make sure that you know what parts of the software are changing. The reason for that is because you need to know what parts. I mean, obviously, you should do everything, but reality is reality. You need to look at this stuff and figure out where the changes are happening so that you know what to look at specifically that is of relevance to either your users, your app that you've built, whatever role you have with the organization or the organization you work with, the organizations you work with. You got to target that, right? Like you can't just QA the whole software every single time. Reality says that doesn't really work. And so if you're, for example, maybe you use Pro, maybe a couple back office people use Pro, whole business is in WebDirect, you're going to be looking at those changes real carefully to find out, if you can know ahead of time, hey, this change is going to bite me. Hey, they're changing around this stuff that we use all the time. Maybe we should have a second server and do some testing first, stuff like that. There's a couple customers where a couple of the bugs that exist in 19.4 short version didn't work for them. The issue with exporting files on WebDirect that have, I don't know, spaces or pluses in the name or something like that, that mostly doesn't matter. But for the people that it does matter for, it's can't do it. They downgraded to 19.3. Giving up performance and everything else with that, right? So like you have to make choices, and now that's fixed in 19.5, so they can reevaluate that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to be said, and we're kind of already for the large degree kind of cleared some of this stuff out. But if you folks have questions about this, now's the time to ask. But I want to point out one thing, as Jacob just said, is that having a test server, and I know people say they don't want to do that, and they say, well, if I read the release notes carefully, I will know whether I can just run an update and use a new software. And as nicely as I can say this, you cannot, right? And there's two reasons for this. And this came up real recently. In fact, you're seeing kind of some cleanup here in 19.5 from this. Two things. One, there'll be a bug that Claris doesn't know about. Or two, which actually I'm kind of surprised I see this being Apple and everything, but there's times where Claris makes a fundamental change to the product that the person who makes a change doesn't document it internally at Claris and or doesn't think it's important, doesn't say anything. And this quote function change that happened in 19.5 is a perfect example of that. The quote, basically what Claris did with 19.5 is there's an engineer down there and probably an engineer manager, whoever their names are, I'm sure. They don't want to be associated with this. It's like the guy who crashed the lunar rover that one time, or the satellite, because he did all his calculations on re-entering Mars atmosphere in metric, and they should have been imperial units. He didn't have the units set correct, or didn't carry the units, or whatever. There are bugs that no one knows about. That's one thing. And the other thing is that there are changes that Claris doesn't think are important to notate, because the person who has to make that determination determines it's not important, okay? And the quote one was that. They did the quote change deliberately on purpose. And the people who made it in engineering, my guess, probably aren't serious FileMaker developers. So them retroactively changing a function that's existed for, say, 20 years or so didn't bother them at all, right? They said, well, it should be, people, whatever, right? But the problem is we have solutions that use the quote function. The behavior was really not a little different. It was really different, right? And it broke a lot of and
return completely different characters.
Yeah.
I'm stoked about 19.5. Basically, as of now, we're back to the third or fourth patch out of a version, and we're like,
we talked about this the other day. Yeah. Is this a stable stone? Once again, we're always trying to walk across the creek.
We're gonna find. I mean, we're gonna find out. I have not had new huge issues with it yet. I'll say yet. We don't have too many of the servers out, but we do have 19.5.2. This is 3 again. It came out like Wednesday or something. 3 came out on Wednesday. 19.5.2 is deployed. I have that deployed to several customers. I just did an update. There was a customer that was on 19.1 or 19.2 still. And so I went, they're not a user that knows or cares. They all use Pro. And I was like, all right, 19.5.3. And so we'll see. But they'll get free performance and stuff like that out of it. I'm not seeing anything that says warning, warning. And they've, 5.3 fixes the issues with the backup system, which is a little, it makes me nervous that they were in there in the first place, basically.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What document are we looking at right here? Because
this is 5.1, so these are like changes that they made. I kind of wanted to like cover a couple of the because like that's why my example even previously with WebDirect is something that might change suddenly hugely and break your stuff. They're like, we thought that they were going to sit on WebDirect and like leave it in maintenance mode, just do not much with it. They're reworking it a lot in a major and honestly interesting way. Not fundamentally changing the thing or what it does per se, but they've done a lot of stuff like this where we're now doing kind of on-demand styling generation and stuff for the objects. So if in Pro, you have layout details, objects, fields, etc. Those are styled. That is actually CSS, just like a web page. And so that previously, like every time you saw a screen in WebDirect, like they shipped you a giant blob that was all of that code at once. Now, if you think about you're on a mobile network, you're on Go or something like that, or even on Pro on a laptop on like a 5G or 4G connection, something like you've got one of those cards for your laptop. It doesn't go well because you're like, yeah, ship me 5 megabytes of style. No, don't. That's terrible. And then every time you change layouts, right, you have to do it again. You have to do it again. That's how it used to work. If as you might imagine, that's not how, if you're going to do a professional web publishing or something, again, separate from WebDirect, you wouldn't do it that way. you want to, the web performance optimization, which is the name for that job. A lot of it is slimming down what you're actually shipping to the user and then shipping it more quickly to the user. The same can be applied to things like WebDirect, even though it's, like a big Java, server-side Java custom application thing. And so they're doing that right now. We're getting successive revisions. 4 especially was big for that, which is one of the reasons we jumped to it. And I told customers too. Yep, like I said, it had a couple bugs in it. It wasn't just free, but 19.5 is another round of revision to that, where they're even more intelligently generating and caching styling on a per object basis. That probably implies there's more RAM usage on the server side. It also means that WebDirect is going to look screamingly faster to certain sets of users. Fine, I love it. Yes, Richard.
You just brought up a really great point. This is something that happened to me in a meeting the other day, because Jacob frequently, for those who don't understand Jacob, he's very chatty, and he'll randomly call me, and he just starts monologuing. He connects his brain to his mouth, so it's like a printer, like the old dot matrix printers that would just go
with the big rollers and the little holes on the side. Yeah,
and it's going, and so that's what I get in Jacob's in my head, yakking as he's just doing his stuff. And one of the things that came across in a random yakking moment was that across the board with Amazon EC2 instances, the minimum specification has to go up, right? Yeah. And you were discussing
the true minimum. Yeah.
The true minimum. You want to discuss that a little bit in terms of RAM?
Sure.
Reconnect your mouth to the output and let it go.
Yeah. So all right. So as some of you know, if I've set up your servers or not, and I've talked about it previously, I'm gonna say it used to be, because if you're shipping 19.5, it's frankly not anymore. It used to be possible to fit FileMaker Server on a medium, and on Amazon that's a dual core with 4 gigs of RAM. I'm not gonna say it fit amazingly. If you used basically like more than Pro or Go and like a WebDirect users, a light usage basically, you could do it. It wasn't always great. The performance wasn't amazing, but if you're much more concerned about saving pennies and you have a small organization anyway, it worked basically for the most part. It worked. If you did more than a certain amount of things, if you were all on WebDirect, things like that, I'd just tell you to get a bigger server, you get a large. You have to pay the money. Sorry, basically. We are no longer at the point where I can make a trade-off, with a client like that. It has to go up to a large. That's still a dual core, actually, but 8 gigs of RAM. There are multiple different places in the software where they have been literally and explicitly increasing the RAM usage, mostly to improve performance. So like that's awesome. And also the default requirement, the minimum spec for the server officially has been essentially either a dual core or quad core, I think, and then 8 gigs of RAM for years now. It just wasn't strictly speaking required. We're basically at the point where it's strictly speaking required. I essentially can't fit 19. Well, it's yeah, you can fit 19.5. It's probably the last version that you could possibly put on a medium. Once the next one's out, we'll call it 19.6. It will not, underline the word will not, be possible anymore. I'm not recommending mediums anymore, period. 19.5, I don't deploy them as mediums. So
you might be able to get it to fit, but it's going to suck. So let's just say officially from all of us here.
No, and it's no web direct, like literally Pro and Go, 5 users. That's it. Anything above that, you have to go to a large on 19.5.
And if the database is very large, he's not, any database is small and snug.
And we're talking like 100 megabyte database, gigabyte database, like 1 gig database, tiny data sets, stuff like that. Anything more than that, it will fill out various caches in RAM. That's great. You get good performance out of it. It doesn't fit in the 4 gig performance envelope. It just does not. So
yeah, can I make a statement here? So for Stu just asked a question, is that true for Mac and Windows? The conversation right now is about like if you're about to die, what's the minimum amount of oxygen you can have so you can barely be alive when the ambulance shows to take you to the hospital? Okay. Once again, that's not how to live healthy, right? So to have a more healthy server that doesn't constantly suck in wind, I'd say the minimum for me, is 16 gigs, right? And you need more than that. Now, if you have a Mac, if you have the M1 processors that are more memory happy, et cetera, like that, then a 16 gig M1 with the fancy memory.
I know people ask about Macs. I don't think they ship a 4 gig Mac anymore. Do they?
Well, no, but there's people using old Macs, right? So no. They do ship an 8 gig Mac, and I can tell you that thing sucks when you do more than 2 or 3 apps. I have a couple family members, of which Dana, my wife, she never closes anything on her computer ever. And so it's like Jacob Taylor. He comes to me and he goes, "Hey, I've set a new record for the maximum amount of apps and windows I can have running on my Mac."
This is a window for this stream. You don't want to see the other ones.
No, it's horrible. And Jacob's like, "Hey, this is cool. I can see how hard I can push on the machine before it explodes and fire shoots out the side of the Mac." And Jacob does it on purpose. Dana just does it because she doesn't want to close anything because that takes time and she's busy doing other stuff. So I like it when people kind of misbehave like that because, Stu says guilty. I like it because it shows you what real humans are going to do when given a computer. I can't imagine the stories that have gone on over the years about people and how they interact with computers or iPhones, stuff like that. I remember there were stories about tech support people, a lot of you have been around a while. So the tech support people going, yeah, I've been using a computer, but I'm having a hard time getting my coffee cup holder to come out. And they're like, what's a coffee cup holder? The CD-ROM DVD tray thing that comes out of the computer is what they put there. That's a coffee cup holder on the computer built in for them because it's a cup holder, right? Everyone likes cup holder in their car. That comes out of the little computer. They put that on top. It holds your drink for them, keeps it off the desk because they have a tower of some type, right? Like that. That's like unnatural. Yeah.
My favorite thing was reading through. This is a very me thing. I follow a lot of bugs for various browser like bugs and issues and stuff. Just because I do web development and also because I'm insane a little bit. And so one of the things that you'll learn if you go look at and there's literally public graphs for some of this stuff. Firefox especially, their graphs are public. You can see like how many users are using the software. You can see how many tabs they have open, like, or the averages right across everybody. So they're building software for people that don't exist, right? There's a set of users, or people that I've never met, I suppose. There's a set of users where they're going to build Firefox, and what's the average number of tabs for a Firefox user? It's like 8. I don't think I've had 8 tabs open in Firefox in the last 10 years. Like, I had to close one down and declare tab bankruptcy because I had 1,200 tabs open on my phone. I don't mean my desktop computer. Did you know that mobile Firefox could hold 1,200 tabs? I learned that when I went to close them all, and it said you've closed 1,256 tabs. But like, so someone with 8 things up, I'm like, do you check CNN, click an article, and close each, like?
I do, because it takes over my screen, and I don't use tabs. I force them to pop windows, and when the windows start repeating each other, I force
and then you're like,
close. Yeah, I just did Command W about 5 or 6 times, and I'm good. But I'm not a tab guy because that was a new addition about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And I learned window popping in Mac OS 6. Right. For those of you, that's like learning. It's like going back to Windows 3.1 for the Windows folks out there. It's really old. But, then Multi-Finder came out, and you could have multiple windows open at the same time. And ever since then, that was the way I was trained. And so, so everyone gets their own thing. So anyway, it's interesting about this. And knowing that your users will leave all the tabs open or leave all the icons open on their desktop and never throw anything away. Right.
Yep.
That's another good one.
What Apple finally added that, what is it, the stacks for your desktop or whatever a couple of years ago, after recognizing that there's a chunk of users who just literally every file on the computer is actually on the desktop. And they need a way to automatically organize.
That was a conversation, and we were talking about trying to interact with people and understanding. I can't remember what the problem was we were trying to solve, but it had to do with people. No, it was the story about the professors. This is a good one. I don't know if you have that article. If you can find that article, professors in college, or teaching STEM classes, science, technology, energy, engineering, and math, or whatever it is. Basically, what I would call core competency, kind of basic kind of degrees, right? If you're an English major, I'm sorry, that's not like a real degree, right? I know it is, but it's every English and history major I ever met partied Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and then Sunday for an hour they would do their homework that they should have done the previous week in college, right? It's not a hard degree. Well, the STEM people have these new kids coming in, and none of them understand how file systems work. I learned file systems with the Commodore, and then the Mac largely had them. And there still are file systems out there, but they've been obscured and hidden by the operating systems, like you go into Windows or on Mac or all this sort of stuff, right? See if you can find that. And the problem is that when you're doing engineering, AutoCAD, mathematical, I don't even know if Mathematica is a thing anymore, but you're doing some advanced shit, you can't just throw it all on the desktop, because that's not how science. There's the article. This is the article right here. And so this is really good because it deals with these professors trying to teach people how to understand what a file system is in the computer. And what users do today is they throw everything in one directory, and things aren't organized like hierarchically, right? They're organized by the fact that all the person wants to do is go into a search box and type whatever they want across here in the search box. You can't see my green line, but there it is. They want to type in there, and then it digs through one directory of all the shit and displays it for them. And that's not how computers actually work. Computers actually don't work that way. That's an artificial construct courtesy of Steve Jobs and the guys at Google and whoever else is part of that too. It's not real, but it's real because every kid and every person who's under the age of 30 has been exposed to that, right? And so what do you do with that, right? That's a big deal. That's a big issue, right? It's not a trivial thing. Margaret, if you want to help us copy paste that. I know we're off kind of on the weeds. It's a Friday. We haven't had a lot of questions, but this is the stuff, frankly, to a degree that Claris is wrestling with a little bit. That's why I do tend to cut them some slack at times with some things. This article right here is truly perplexing. The professors are having to give basic. It's almost like we've gone back to the 80s, and so there was this 80s like, hey, this is a mouse, this is a keyboard, this is a laser mouse. Pretty awesome. I might have used a wired one because I don't like to keep changing batteries on my 12 computers, and so you had to explain that to people, and you had to explain to them that the CD thing was not a coffee cup holder, right, or for your soda, right? And then so then the year went on, and then there was a time in there where people kind of were computer illiterate, and now they've almost become computer illiterate again because it's been dumbed down to such a degree that when you ask them to get under the hood and set up a file structure, because you're doing your research documents here, you're doing your grant documents here, you're doing federal compliance here, they just want to throw all that into like one big Dropbox folder and have it be searchable. And that's an artificial construct is all I can say. And it's not real, but it's real in their head, so we have to train them. And the professors thought about saying, hey, you're just going to get an F if you don't do this. And what ended up happening is the students all got Fs because their little brains couldn't process it. So the professors have to do training. So
I had when I took assembly programming, the professor ran the submittal for our work off of his home server, which was, I have nothing but compliments because that's fantastic. You had to format both the directory you were posting to and the file names that you were posting, or they would not be recognized, right? If you didn't hit and it was a printed format in the syllabus. Right. So all normal expectations. Also, good luck for some of them. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway,
I'm gonna feel old eventually. I'm not there yet, but I'm like the historian for some of the stuff, which is terrible because I'm not that old. Like,
no, you're not.
I teach people a bunch of this stuff. They're like, I don't know how that works. I'm like, here's email. Because these things like predate. It's like Gen Z or something. I don't know, whatever about people that are younger than me. I don't care about that. But like, if you grow up with, the internet already existed when you were born or something like that. Like it's a different concept from having been born. Like fiber didn't exist, right? Like if you go to my grandparents or potentially even, my parents, that would have been right when this stuff was developed. They know the world before, telephones were widespread. Grandparents before television was widespread. Like you have to think about how much the world has changed, and now what? We all walk around with smartphones in our pockets that just work wirelessly, right? Well, there's a chunk of people, and I've literally explained this before. Like the question, where does Wi-Fi come from? Like if you didn't know, that would be an amazing concept. And pointing at the little box in the corner that's like Wi-Fi comes from that thing. Oh. Like I've explained that to people when I was in college because they didn't know. They're like, I don't know, my phone just, it does stuff.
It does it. Yeah,
it does stuff.
All right. Well, I don't want to beat on this too much, but this is all kind of part of the progression of the world of FileMaker, and part of it is, it comes in UI design, it comes in with interface, operating system design, comes in with what we're doing, and it's trying to be, I want to say like fashion forward or technology leaning forward for a guy who wears black polo shirts with my name on it for the last 30 some odd years, right? So I don't have fashion forward. I have one setting. But anyway, yeah. So, well, if you folks have comments, questions, shoot us an email to support RC Consulting. We're at the top of the hour. Apologize for that. David Angel's talking about A drive, B drive, C drive, and D drive. Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine. I mean, just trying to.
I remember those.
Oh yeah. Well, they're still there in Windows 11, right? Aren't they still there? Yeah. So not like they've gone anywhere. But yeah,
they'll get rid of them eventually. They probably don't ship all the individual drivers too much anymore because I don't know. Are we finally shipping computers without things like CD drives?
On the Mac's been that way for a while, but I don't know.
Certainly floppy drives, but yeah, I'm just thinking about like people who do. They watch their Blu-ray movies or stuff like that. Like I'm sure that'll be around for a while yet before we just say sayonara and
you have those red
get rid of the drives.
Anyway, so Iger Dave says, how are we going to get better and learn if we coddle dumb things down? Yeah, that's a good question, right? So that's what the professors are not doing. They're forcing these people learn enough of the technologies. They understand directories, they understand paths, and they understand basic file organization before they can even use the software.
It's the old like conversation about like it's like when you learn math, there's certain parts of the basics you have to learn. You may never use them after that, but it's like once you take trig, it changes the way you think, even if you don't do trig on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah.
If you learn the basics of a file system, not anyone in particular, just what that means, generally speaking, there's a bunch of stuff that you can interact with that if you don't have that knowledge is much more difficult, if not impossible. I mean, right? People are smart, they can figure it out. But if they don't know that's a thing, like they're not familiar that that's a concept, even if they don't know it or understand it, right? You can go identify that, say, oh, I don't know that. Let me go figure it out. Like, you have to at least get people to that point to where they're running around. They know everything's a search box. You know, it's just magic. Everything works. Flat files everywhere. Great. But also they're going to work on a hard drive at some point, or they're going to deal with some legacy system, or even like, you know, it's kind of like interacting with government, right? Half that stuff is still in filing cabinets in a particular office. It's not digitized. It's not. You have to go call Carol, who is the lord over that room of documents, and she knows that it's in drawer 4, cabinet number 22.
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff. And yeah, you know, we are over time moving a lot of the stuff to databases, to indexing. Honestly, like not to talk about who I learned these things from, but like some parts of the government are doing that. And the way that they're doing it is they're doing, we'll say things like FileMaker, databases, generally speaking, to index where the documents are physically located, because they're not being digitized, but they do need to be able to, you know, find Google them for it. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we're going to cut you guys loose. So, all right, that's it for today. Margaret, you want to run the closer for us? Top Cat, Stu, David, Ruben, welcome. Michelle Gravel, other Michelle, Iger, Dave, everyone else. See you next week. Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!